Hello Pipe community, Barepipe here. Today I want to talk about restoring logos on pipe stems. This is like a fraught subject because we all know logos are precious things on pipes and it's very difficult to bring them back once you've destroyed them. There are two types of logos on stems, and I'm only talking about one of the two types. The type I'm not talking about is the kind that you would find on a Daniel or a Cecchini, which is the inlay dot. Both Cecchini and Daniel happens to use a round dot, probably because it was a simple thing to inlay. Also, the ones that has a metal inlay, like GBDs, like Jobies. Those stems and those logos are notoriously difficult to restore, and really the only way I know of to restore those is to go and find yourself a replacement stem in your parts box that happens to be a close fit. The one I want to talk about is the stamped logos. Your kind of run-of-the-mill daily pipes like your Petersons, your Savinellis, your Stanwells, they all use a stamped logo. Essentially what it is, in the factory, they imprint the shape of the markings onto the vulcanite or the acrylic stem, and then they apply some kind of color in the markings to create the logo. Now what often happens is by the time that pipe makes its appearance on the estate market, the color is long gone. Markings for the logo are still there, but it's no color. I was curious to know, is there a way to restore the color in a situation like that? If you still have a clear marking for the logo, can you somehow paint the color back in, so to speak? And I decided to try it on the Rob Edel that I've been using in the last few videos, mainly because it's kind of a low-hanging fruit. It has a really nice, clearly stamped logo on its stem. It had a tiny little bit of color left in there, so I could see what the original color was. It was white. And it seemed like if I could, it's a fairly easy one to try and repaint. So I did do it, and it worked quite well. Let's see if I can get it to pick up there. You can see it has two little intersecting circles. And I used the paint that I use in fine scale modeling. And here it is. This is a paint that's made by a company called Vallejo, I think out of Spain. The name is spelled V-A-L-L-E-J-O. You can buy it in fine scale modeling stores, either online or in brick and mortars. And the reason I use this paint is, firstly, it's an acrylic, so it's easy to work with. Second, it's designed to go onto plastic. So it works well for acrylic stems, also happens to work well for vulcanite, I discovered now. But the main feature of this paint is because it's designed for fine scale modeling, it goes on really thin, it adheres very well to the surface and allows any kind of surface detail to come through the paint. The pigment in this paint is extremely fine, so you can work into really fine detail with it. It has a very solid color, but it's very runny. So all those aspects of it, I think, makes it quite appropriate for what I wanted to do with this. Now, the only downside of this video today is that I kind of screwed up my recording. And the first bit of work I did, I forgot to press record. So I'm sorry, I have to walk you through what I did. So let me show you. First thing I did was I sanded down the outside of the stem. I took it with a micromesh pad up to around the 4,000 to 6,000 grit level. The reason I wanted to do that is I wanted to create a bit more of a glassy surface on the outside so the paint would be less likely to adhere to it in the areas where I didn't want to have the paint. Second thing I did was the inside surface of the marking for the logo. I went over that with a needle and a magnifying glass extremely carefully. I basically just scraped the inside of the markings to make sure that I removed all the dirt that was in there, clean it out, and then I brushed it with a toothbrush just to get rid of any of the loose materials. So then I took the Vallejo paint, dabbed on a little bit with a toothpick. The capillary action kind of sucks it into the logo, and then scraped off the excess material with the toothpick. And that's the point where I actually realized I wasn't recording, because I had to do this a few times to build up the paint layer inside the groove. So the video picks up on my second layer of paint that I'm putting on this, and I can show you from that point onwards what was happening. Okay, so I have now dropped in the paint on there. I'm going to do a tiny bit more. I've been using a toothpick to do it. And the Vallejo paint is very runny. It's very, very thin because it's made for airbrushes. Just putting a second layer on. Just want to make sure it fills up properly into the little cavity, and really the capillary action, the natural capillary action, sucks up the paint and it fills in to the cavity. Looks like a bit of a mess right now, but I think it's going to be fairly easy to clean it up. Okay, now I'm looking at this through a magnifying glass because of the fact that it's so difficult to see, it's so small. And I'm just going to see if I can dab in a little more. Now this works. I have a Parker with the same problem that I would do the same thing to. And of course the Vallejo paints comes in just about any color that you can imagine. So if you have a logo with a weird color, it'll work for that too. Okay, there we go. So I'm going to let that dry now. Just going to run the toothpick over it for a second and make sure that most of the excess paint's removed. There we go. Now, once it's dry, I'm going to give it a tiny bit of sanding, very little, and we're going to see if it worked. Okay, the paint is dry now. I actually ran it under a hairdryer for a second just to make sure. And I'm going to grab my 4000 Grit Sandpaper here. So let me just move my lamp and magnifying glass out of the lens there. And I'm just going to give it a very light 4000 Grit sanding now. See if we can get the circles to appear. That's looking pretty good. Now there's a couple of spots in the middle. I think what I'm going to do with those, I'm just going to grab a toothpick again and see if I can pick those away a little bit. Again, I'm looking at it through a magnifying glass. And because of the fact that it's fairly fresh paint, it comes off fairly quickly. There we go. And now I'm going to grab my 6000 grit and just give it a bit of a run over. Actually, that looks amazing. That looks so much better than I anticipated. Look at that. And there is a restored logo.